Welcome, listeners. Welcome to Kyle and Victoria's Cult Cinema Cast. We're reviewing Shock Treatment, the underappreciated failed follow-up to Rocky Horror Picture Show. With none of the really iconic people in it. Richard O'Brien's in this one too. I think I mentioned last week that the lead actress in this is a extra in Rocky Horror. She's one of the chorus in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cliff De Young's new in this, and he's playing. So yeah, a little bit of start. This is starring Brad and Janet, but with different actors.
Yeah.
From the last one. So they're older in this. I think they're in their 30s or late 20s. I don't know. I got the impression they were supposed to be pretty young in Rocky Horror, but I think this is like several years down the line.
Yeah, I think they're in Rocky Horror supposed to be like in their late teens sort of idea, early 20s, college age sort of, right?
Yeah, because their friends Becky and Ralph were getting married, and they're in this one too. And I think Becky's like a fair bit older actually than we had initially understood, because Becky's seems a bit older than Janet, but I can't say for sure. It's some people just look older than other people. So yeah, a few characters returning. Obviously Ralph and Becky weren't major in the last one. They were just kind of like at the beginning, but no other returning characters that I can remember.
Yeah, I don't think there's any returning characters. I did read online that the Dr. Wright was supposed to be that there's like fan theories that he might have been the criminologist that is unnamed in Rocky Horror. So that's speculated that he's a returning character, even though because he wasn't, or the criminologist isn't named in Rocky Horror. So I kind of read that, which was a little bit interesting. But yeah, Janet and her man, the line. It's making me stupid. What's his name? Brad. There we go.
Brad. That actually statement sounds a bit like it could be like a song from one of these movies. Her man, oh man. That could be a song in one of these movies, I think. I'm pretty sure we did Damn It, Janet.
There you go. I'll have to pitch it.
Yeah. The third film in the series.
That was in Rocky Horror.
Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't returned to this. I think there's been sequels to Rocky Horror, at least in musical form. I don't know so much in movie form. But a little bit more background on this. Yeah, it also got a limited midnight release like Rocky Horror, but this didn't do nearly as well. It probably should have just gotten a regular release. I don't think it's it doesn't have like at very least it doesn't have the iconic imagery that Rocky Horror has. I don't think there's anything with that sort of potential. We can talk about whether it's whether it's straight up quality is good, but I don't think it has I can't see too many people like cosplaying the characters from this movie as much. It does have its following. It's just it was adapted. This was actually a movie first. It's been adapted to a stage production.
It's really interesting actually because of like the cult following of Rocky Horror. This movie was almost like an intentional cult classic. Like usually what happens is someone is creating a movie and then it's a total flop, but there's a cult following,
Yeah.
right? And so that's kind of the formula you get for cult cinema, and this show was coming out of a cult like fan favorite. Rocky Horror is so iconic, and they were trying to, I think, move with that, like, you know, use that fan base and move with it. But that, like, I don't know, can you create a cult classic like with the intention of creating a cult classic? And I don't
Mhm.
know if they successfully do that or not. And so I think that's the biggest difference to me, is that, like, it is, this movie Shock Treatment is zany and crazy and fun. It's actually still super fun, and has a lot of, I think, similar feel to Rocky Horror, but it's just not as good because it wasn't like discovered, quote unquote, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Definitely part of it at
there's my
very
review
least.
in 30 seconds. We can finish.
Um,
Roll credits.
yeah.
I'm kidding.
So a little bit of extra history on this. They were initially going to have Curry and Barry Bostwick go in for the main roles in this, but they backed out when I think Curry backed out when it says Curry backed out when Barry said he was unavailable. Um, so they didn't do that. Also, they were planning to shoot this on location in Denton, Texas, but production screeched to a halt in 1980 when the Screen Actors Guild went on strike. So they had like a very brief window to actually make this. So they retooled the entire thing so they could shoot it in sound stages, which I think actually works in the movie's favor, which is kind of remarkable. I can't imagine this being better.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah, I
great.
can't imagine them doing. I can honestly cannot imagine them at all doing this outside of a soundstage. I think that would like shoot the premise in the foot of it.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting that it was like a last minute change, because I actually, like, when we get to talking about setting and kind of the meta qualities of this setting, I actually really like that. I
Oh
think it
yeah.
is points in Shock Treatment's favor. So that's cool that it was like a last minute, like, oh, we have to pivot, and so we're going to do this on a soundstage.
Yeah, and it ends up like sometimes like restraint, like adversity breeds creativity, but a lot of projects just die in the water when they can't get what they need. So it's very impressive whenever they can nail a change like this. Um, like it's yeah, like like some great pieces of art come from someone's foisting a last minute change on the production, but it's always commendable because projects can just as easily die.
That's good that they saved that $1 million off the hop, because it did not do well at the box office,
No.
considering what they spent and what they made back.
Yeah, I think it needed like a regular release and then it would have at least done okay, I think. Um it's certainly not as nakedly controversial as Rocky Horror would be or is. So like I believe it'd probably be easier to swing that by the general public. Not to say anything about quality, but yeah, this is definitely something you could have swung by the general public a lot easier. So it should have gotten a regular release, but they kind of like foisted themselves into that position. So
I mean, there is implied incest in this one, though. So I'm like, well, is it more mainstream or not? And I know that it's not like legitimate because those characters are actors, but like, you don't know that when those
I don't.
scenes are
Yeah, I don't
happening.
think that's
Um
literally.
so I'm like, it's
Yeah, it's
still,
not said straight up that they're not brother and
yeah.
sister, but I I think it's yeah,
It
it's
is
said
later on.
somewhere. It's said
It is
somewhere
later
they're
on.
not actually. But yeah, it's just a weird little choice they made.
Mhm.
Like it's weird that they're not just like if you're making new identities, it's like Oh yeah, now you're going into witness protection, so now your wife's your sister. Like that's a terrible idea. That's why? That doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense. That makes things confusing. And actually it's gonna raise
Setting
questions.
setting people up for
Yeah.
failure. But also, you know what, Kyle? Don't kink shame. Don't
No.
kink shame. I mean, you don't know what those people are into. So, like, I don't know. Wouldn't be my choice. Probably wouldn't be your
Yeah,
choice.
no.
But who knows? If you're posing as crazy mad scientists,
Yeah, no,
why not?
yeah, it just seems like this would have raised questions, which is the main issue I have.
Yeah, yeah. Fair enough.
Because you think when you're adopting a new, yeah, when you're adopting a new identity, you want to be like low profile, and like if someone catches you making out with your sister, they're gonna start asking questions, probably. I would assume so.
Granted, yeah. And but my point is that it's not like it is still
Yeah. Oh
quirky.
yeah.
The show is obviously still quirky and weird, and I think like definitely like has some of the similar elements that Rocky Horror. I guess Rocky Horror is more controversial because it's more in your face, but like it's like this isn't
Oh
not
yeah.
that either. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that choice to have like these psychologists be posing as siblings and then be lovers is obviously like intentional. So and there's um I think there's a lot of content in this that seems very elevated to me actually. Um like like Rocky Horror is so fun and it's almost farcical,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. And Shock Treatment is very satirical. And so it's like making fun at a lot of different like industries. Kyle's pouring
Yeah.
another glass. Um, and we're 15 minutes in and Kyle's like, "Oh man, I need
I
another
can mute.
drink."
I could have. You know, I can mute my end of the
um
audio, Victoria. If you
but
don't
sorry.
say anything, no one notices.
Oh, I noticed. So now I'm going to draw attention to it. This is how I operate. If you
Yep.
don't know that, I don't think we're really friends. Actually, like our friendship has been called into question before. So here we go. Anyway, no, what I'm saying is that like Shock Treatment is it's almost more sophisticated, I think, in some of the like the critique that it's making on society. So I kind of think that's interesting because like maybe the content is seems a little more tame or like it can fly under the radar because it's not so like in your face. You don't have cross dressing and like boom right there, you know, people who are uptight and mean aren't
Yep.
going to be offended, right? Because you're kind of more subversive in Shock Treatment, but the content is still there. Like you know
Yeah.
the issues that they're addressing in Shock Treatment are still like more progressive issues, I guess, is what I'm saying. Not
Yeah.
that okay. Anyway, I yes,
Yeah.
there we
No,
go.
I
I
don't.
rest my case.
Yeah. No, this is by no means politically inconsistent with Rocky Horror. Like this is not like a toned down piece of fiction. This is still making points that's the same people from making the original would want to make. So it's not some weird uh, ca- uh, catering to the masses. And if they were catering to the masses, they probably would have stuck with adopted a wider release. So
Everything is
yeah.
political.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. Um, yeah. No, this is still a very political piece. So it's not as like the only thing that you could say is like, okay, someone not getting this versus not getting Rocky Horror's message. Like if someone was just like, "Oh, I don't think Rocky Horror is about any gay people at all," you'd be like, "You're kidding. You're lying to me." I'm sure someone is that stupid, but
I really I hope in 2020 there are no people who are that like uneducated, but holy smokes, yeah, you're
yeah.
probably right.
Um Yeah, well, it is a new day. Trump's not president anymore, so there's that.
Woo! Yay! Ah!
Yeah, we just got
and like I'm so excited about the new VP.
yeah, yeah, the news
Oh
just
man.
broke the morning of recording.
That's actually why that's why that's why we're
Yeah,
drinking today. It's in
yeah,
celebration with our listeners in the
yeah.
States.
Pennsylvania just the news about Pennsylvania calling it just happened this morning, so that's an instance of the time of recording. So that was a long little stretch there.
Hey, we're still celebrating.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. It's
We're still celebrating even by the time that this gets released, right? Like it starts today, and then whenever this is released, we're still going to be super excited that Trump is no longer in office.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
worst that happens now is that he goes to Mar-a-Lago and calls it the White House of the South and tries to be some sort of anti-president. That's a real political term, by the way. That's not something I made up.
well, really, anti-president is a real term?
Um, here's the thing: if you get the term from anti-pope, which is like an unofficial pope who's claiming to be the real pope, and that's what Trump would be doing in my scenario. So he'd be an anti-president. That'd be the
Oh,
political science term for what be doing.
wow, this just turned into an entirely different podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Okay, dear future Victoria, if the fall of the United States is continuing to happen because we now have an anti-president, remember that you were very excited that Biden was elected.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily carry within a power, but
Okay,
it's just a fun political term that I kind of like to use. It's fun.
should we talk about movies? I feel like we should
Yeah,
talk about
yeah. Let's get
movies,
it.
even though everything is political.
Yeah,
I
no.
feel like we should talk about movies.
Yeah, let's get into our movie about how how Nixon era policies are like totally terrible. Anyway, into the plot. Uh,
Oh no.
yep. We open to an image of a man with a corsage covered in shadow, um, with a bit of a intro overlog talking about how some man wanted to live fast and he was going to get the girl from another man. And that explains this shadowy character whose name is Farley. Farley Flavors. This Farley Flavors is evidently concocting some plot to get a woman from a married man. He's a fast food king, so that's yeah. So we're opening that up. We get our intro of them after they like pan out to show that he's sitting in like a office like the lady that the guy from Deal or No Deal has, where it's just like a shadowy figure that overlooks the studio. That's the only other example I can think of that. They pan out and we get to see a TV studio, which some people are setting up for and is currently empty. And this eventually leads to the people of Denton being let in to go put out the overture of the song for Denton USA, which is the name of the song. It's kind of a fun song. It's kind of catchy. Sets up the mood. Essentially, that Denton is just like a normal American town in Texas, which is weird because no one in this movie has a Texas accent.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't even notice. And it also marks the last time that you'll actually be able to understand what people are saying and doing. Like as soon as the opening song is done, I was so confused about what was going on from here on out. So, just a heads up.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a nonsense world, isn't it? It's just like they're moving from television, like they reference like 4 different television shows. And like the plot is like they're gonna move one. Eventually, they're just gonna like try to move Janet from one show to a different show, and like there's a crossover where she starts in one show and goes to another show, and she's doing that so she can earn her place on another show. All of which names we forget. So yeah, the citizens of Denton take a seat in the studio audience to observe this live broadcasting of Denton television, which is something that Farley Flavors has cooked up and everyone's really excited about. They've been watching it a fair bit. They open the show with the Denton dossier, which is like a news show of some sort, which is sort of serious. Becky from the last movie hosts it. Initially, she has a character named Scott Wright, or Judge Oliver Wright.
Yeah, his doctor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So she has him on for their morning guest, and he talks, and she's just like, "Oh, don't you love the song we just all sung?" Which is weird. I don't know that people normally address the songs they sing in musicals. So he says he likes it in a way. He's not like, he's kind of cool on it. And this eventually is going to lead to them getting canceled. Is the short of it. Like, they've questioned the grand plan, so they're going to get canceled. Which is how getting canceled really works in real life, is it's a construct of big business to attempt to placate the masses in futile effort to ignore their own problems, which they continue to do. So don't complain left for cancel culture. It's the rich guys playing you against everyone. So there you go.
You just said so many big words and I can't follow. I'm like, you said placate the masses. And that was the last thing that I understood. So for the not uber smart, or maybe the people who haven't had 3 glasses of wine, you should say that whole thing in like smaller words. How does cancel culture work?
We're gonna move on. I think this is just gonna make us more confused. I think it's funnier that I just do the rant. Short of it is, big business is behind the whole thing. It's not
Okay.
It's not actually the thing that random leftos on the internet have any power over. So that happens. They end that show and then start. During the song, it's very interesting. We get to get a bit of characterization for Brad, who just like mopes through the whole thing. He tries clapping along with the audience and just can't quite get it in time. I think he at one point, he's toward the end of the song, he's just like holding up his hands waiting to clap, and then there's no more clap in the rest of the song, so he's just kind of like, oh. And yeah, he's just moping through the whole thing, so we get a bit of a characterization from him. Janet's with him. She's kind of enjoying this, at least basically.
Yeah, I want to talk about Brad because like what you said about him trying to participate in the opening song, like with his stupid glasses and his little curly head. I just love Brad in this movie. I like Brad in Rocky Horror too, but I'm like, man, he just has it really rough in this movie, and I don't understand why, because I don't think he seems like he's done anything wrong, and then his wife like abandons him, and she's mad at him for not clapping in time, and I'm like, what? Like, that seems very strange. So I from that opening scene all the way through felt a lot of empathy for Brad, and I just like his little stupid puppy dog face made me really happy the whole way through. So I liked this version.
Yeah, he's not like Brad from last movie where he was kind of like Hunky Brad, which is how I'm going to refer to him. He's kind of just like this is dorky Brad, that was Hunky Brad, and like he didn't really.
I mean,
the Brad and Hunky Brad could like take
Are
off
you
his glasses and look like all handsome and whatnot. This one he has to do like some
mm,
work.
fair? Okay, that's fair because like Hunky Brad is still fairly dorky. Like
Oh yeah,
so
no,
I'm like he is he's settled. He's settled into his marriage and so that sometimes maybe isn't always making everyone as happy in the marriage as it could. So I do like the Hunky Brad and what did you call this one? Dorky Brad?
Dorky Brad. Yeah, Hunky Brad could kind of do like he could play
Yeah.
Superman actually. I feel like that's what Superman does. You can definitely get that moment where he like takes off his
Oh,
glasses
yeah.
and you see it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they get invited onto this show called Marriage Maze, which is about like sorting out marriage problems. And the impression we're given as the audience that Janet and Brad's marital problems are like fairly minor. I sense that there is issues here, but nothing that can't be like sorted out with a little bit of therapy. I don't think it's certainly not as big as the character they're introducing for this. The host of this show is a Dr. Schnitz, and he is like this Nazi-ish blind scientist who's trying to like uh, make this big tiny issue into like this big sprawling things. He calls Brad like an emotional cripple and like plays up his issue for laughs. And this is kind of playing to a reputation this movie has gotten as a bit of a prophet of a movie, where it's kind of like sort of predicted this whole like reality TV psychologist thing that eventually became really popular in the later day and got really schlocky later on. That's not entirely accurate, I don't think. I looked it up, but yeah, it's definitely was before it got like really popular. Um, Schnitz is kind of like a almost like a Maury type or whatever the fuck the British guy's name is who does that same thing. You could also extend this to like Dr. Phil or Dr. Oz, who do who like engage in like really quackerish material, but aren't but are trying to deal with like a serious issue.
You mean like Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil that exploit people's trauma and then with no credentials talk to them like they're fucking professionals? Sorry,
Yep,
we struck a
precisely.
nerve because I am in my day-to-day job like I have a bachelor of social work degree and so like mental health is a total area of passion and concern of mine and I do like that this is kind of exposing maybe the cruelty of well reality TV in general but then yeah like those shows that are going to become popular where we parade people's trauma because that's what it is it's their trauma and then like for entertainment right and so yeah I have no patience for that and definitely a point in favor for shock treatment because again it's like it's that critique on what is happening and you're right like it was just at the beginning of that reality TV kind of popularity when this movie was released but like it definitely through the 80s and 90s right like Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil and all those shows became huge.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, precisely. Really, it's also not only that, but unhelpful. Like I don't think a lot of these shows really help too many people, especially for like something as small as this. I don't believe that making a spectacle of it would be the best thing for this couple. I think a private conversation was what was needed, and that's I think a lot of people are kind of like almost lured in by these talk shows and like are made into like thinking like, oh, this is a way to solve everyone's problems. But like a lot of these reality TV shows don't actually solve anything. A few of them do, like a few of like the restaurant ones, they turn out okay, but a lot of them don't. I think it's, but it's also a matter of like, it's edited material for a lot of it. And yeah, it's just not necessarily helpful in this situation, especially not that it's ever real helpful a lot of the time. A lot of this stuff could be dealt with by in private by professionals without it being on TV and humiliating people, but also um, a lot of people are also kind of like desperate for any kind of help, so they go to like some rando on TV, which is just the way that works to a certain degree. We don't have the infrastructure to deal with a lot of mental health issues. Let's face it.
Yeah, and I think that like what is interesting about how shock treatment approaches this trend that is going to start and continue from kind of this point early 80s all the way through to today is that it is kind of absurd, right? Like that, like you take someone's personal hurt and exploit it and make it this big sensation, and really those people needed interventions from professionals um and right, like, so it's kind of showing like how ridiculous it is to make a talk show out of that. And so because it's like, oh, we're just going to nitpick this really, like he's an emotional cripple, and then make that into a big joke and everyone's going to laugh and it's going to be so gross and ridiculous. Well, that's kind of the point that shock treatment is making. And then you take a look at like guests on Dr. Phil, and I'm like, oh man, these people just really need a qualified professional, and here we're giving them Dr. Phil, or like not questioning if that is um appropriate or not, I guess. Like that, because I know lots of people who've watched Dr. Phil, right? And it's like kind of in our nature to eat up the eat up the spectacle of other people's lives, I think, which is why reality TV does so well. But then I'm like, okay, but that's not cool when you're trying to further the conversation on like legitimate mental health intervention and support.
Yeah, and Wright, Judge Wright and Becky also points out while watching the show over the closed circuit that they seem Brad and Janet seem like a good couple, and that like obviously he's not involved in that, and that seems a bit unnecessary because they clearly do have a little bit of problems going on, as we get from the song we get where the song "Bitchin' in the Kitchen," which happens while they do a commercial break and they're debating whether or not Brad's going to go deeper into the program, into this other show called Denton Vale, which is like a a psych hospital pretend thing. So they have that song, and they're clearly having some problems, but these guys aren't really helping. And now, in real life, the motivation for not helping these people is, frankly, financial. They're trying to do this to get money and like doing it in like a very way that's good for spectacle rather than what's most effective to the people. And this has been a thing for a long time. Um, I think the British equivalent of Maury was canceled a few years back because like they humiliated a guy on TV, and he wasn't necessarily a good guy, but he did commit suicide, so it kind of like takes the catharsis out of it to it for a lot of people. Like a lot of people like, oh, that guy's a shitty guy, but like we don't want most shitty people to actually be punished with death. So they're taking this big problem instead this smaller problem, relatively smaller problem, and instead of dealing with it tactfully, they're making it into a big spectacle for private audience.
Exactly. Yes. And I think that like that's something cool that, this was doing, that shock treatment was doing, because I don't think these conversations were really registering on people's, like, in people's minds. But um the show does explore these themes, right? So it is ahead of its time, and I
Yeah.
think from what I was reading online just about reception and stuff, that's one of the reasons that people have grown to love it
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just like it didn't get to people, and it was like put in like a weird situation where it didn't have the opportunity to spread as maybe it should have. And I think a lot of favors could have been done for everyone if this had gotten a wider release. I think we have a couple other things, interesting things to point out. Like, they point out that like you might see that think that like, oh, why is Janet going along with this? It's kind of making her look dumb that she's like falling for this stuff. But as she points out that like, I don't really watch it, the show that they're sending Brad to, Denton Vale, all that often. I don't really know what happens on it. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Like, how many people really watch Dr. Phil? Like, it's a popular show, but a lot of people just like only know it by like reputation or have seen like a couple clips. They don't really watch it like more than all that often. Like, I've only maybe seen like a third of an episode at my longest sitting of it. So I think that's part of the problem too, is just like people don't really watch it all that much. It's like some people watch it, but they're not all that but the people that like really like it just wouldn't know better. If someone was actually didn't really care for it, they just stopped watching. I thought it was kind of silly. So yeah, that's a interesting little detail they've thrown in. It's also preemptive, which is also weird. Um, so yeah, we get the "Bitchin' in the Kitchen" song, in which Brad and Janet agree to commit him to Denton Vale, which is I really like the song "Bitchin' in the Kitchen." It's pretty fun. It's full of a lot of awkward rhymes that are just like shoehorned in.
Okay, so you brought this up. So what is your favorite song of
My
the
favorite.
entire movie?
Now I have the soundtrack on my phone, so I listen to the ones I listen to are mostly
Really?
this. Yeah, no. I listen to this. The dual duet at the end of the movie, and then occasionally like breaking out. So it's this and the dual duet at the end of the movie are my favorites.
The dual duet is so good. Like the song is so fantastic. I really loved it.
Yeah, we'll save that for later when we talk about it. But yeah, that's pretty good.
And I also really like "Bitchin' in the Kitchen." It's a fun song. And I do like Janet's little makeover. That's one of the TV tropes that I'm like, my feminist heart shouldn't love, but I really do, is the makeover trope. And
Yeah,
so the little black dress and "Me of Me" are also super fun, but I'm like rebelling against the fact that I love them so much. So yeah. Anyway, cool. It is a really good, like, it is a
yeah. It's like a montage scene. I don't think it's inherently that bad, really. It's a transformation sequence. Like, it can absolutely be used irresponsibly, but I think it's perfectly good in a lot of scenarios. But yeah.
Now we're going to talk about the ethics of irresponsible makeup montage scenes. I love the way you put that, because it is a fun trope, but totally can be
Yeah.
used irresponsibly. And I feel like in this movie, it's more
Yeah, and
transformative. You're
like
right.
like if you ask me about like some that's kind of like tangentially related to the makeover trope, the one where like the lady takes off her glasses, undoes her hair, and like swishes around and like is suddenly attractive for weird reasons. Like, no, she was also attractive before she took the glasses off. What are you teaching our young girls about glasses? Is that they can't be pretty without glasses? That's bad. You shouldn't be doing that. And I think that's a bad reflection of the makeover trope. So, yeah. So I'm definitely on board with what you're saying there. Yeah.
It's cool. Okay. Next point, Kyle. Continue with our plot overview.
So yeah, they kind of get sort of like pressure, a little bit of pressured on live TV to go along with this too. I don't think we can ignore that. That's another consequence of doing this incredibly sensitive therapy on live television, is that you're pressured in a certain direction, which can be bad. Sometimes it could be used responsibly, possibly, but there's a lot of ways that can be used wrong. So they go back into the back to meet with Doctors Cosmo and Nation McKinley, who are played by Richard O'Brien and Patricia Quinn. They are the hosts of Denton Vale. They are some random doctors that are around. They're setting up for doing this. Brad attempts to protest him going into this mentalist institution, and that results in one of the nurses in a nurse character putting that results in a nurse character putting a syringe into his neck and sedating him, and then she sits down. They use the collapsing as an excuse to what's the word? Admit him to the hospital. This nurse character is weird. They show her panties a lot. Like, I remember watching this and I'm like, I forget.
What is her most defining?
Like, I forget about it because they're like doing other things, and it's like she bends over a lot for some reason, and I'm like, oh yeah, she does that 4 times in this movie.
Yeah, interesting choice. And I mean, I think it's supposed to be shocking, like kind of the same idea as Rocky Horror, right? Where like we're like sexing things up because that's all that those left wingers are good for, is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So we might as well be the evil, right? So I think that's kind of the idea with that, is that it's like pointing out the silliness of over-sexing women and medical roles, maybe. I don't know.
It's just a weird little thing. I think Nurse Anzalon is her name, I think, is the character. Anyway, so she does actually do something helpful in recommending that she doesn't sign his that Janet doesn't sign Brad's admittance papers until tomorrow, because that way she gets the first day free. Which handy, I guess. Could result in some problems if you do it to the wrong people, but yeah, suppose it does save them at the end of the movie, so I won't criticize it too hard. While we're cutting away from this, there's a brief scene, which is one of the few really awkward scenes they just insert in to make Janet's parents stay in the movie, despite this being on a soundstage. So they win a contest, which gets them a stay at this indoor house, is the best way I can describe it. And they use that as a show, and you get to be on a reality show for a couple days. So Janet gets to talk to her parents for a little bit. Her parents are kind of jerks. Like, one of them will occasionally like stand up for something and be like good, but then like the other one will quickly like say something awful. Like um Janet's father will dismiss that he's like Janet's mother will bring up that Brad's adopted, and she'll make some like dumb uh like scaremongering thing about that, but then her dad will step up for it, and then occasionally her mom will want like to give her give the Janet a fancy dress, and like her dad will make a big deal about it. So it's the parents are a bit of a villain in this, which I think is inserting choice toward their politics. The politics of the movie is that the parents end up getting left behind in order to advance the good ending. So they talk about a bit. Janet eventually points out that a friend of hers from high school that her dad thought was a really cool guy is gay and got into a gangbang with some Mexicans. This is how the movie puts it. And that causes Janet's dad to go into a big homophobic rant song, which is wouldn't necessarily be acceptable in a lot of movies, but I gotta to point this out. He's doing this. He's doing this song where he's like trying to point out what it's like to be manly and like wearing like a war helmet and trying to show himself to be this big manly man while he's mowing an astroturf lawn. Like he's just like, yeah, he's making a big he's making this big show of how manly he is while he's doing something absolutely pointless for no reason in order just to make him look manly by a certain standard.
I mean, if you were again super ignorant and like didn't understand the like the creative team behind shock treatment, you wouldn't understand why this is an ironic scene, right? Like if someone just took this dad's homophobic rant song out of context and and like put it on Facebook or YouTube and then was like, I agree with everything in this song, like it would be so ridiculous, because if you know the people behind shock treatment and Rocky Horror, like
yeah,
the same people who would take this song out of context and like hold it up are the people who would be hateful towards the creators of this movie and Rocky Horror, right? So it's like, again, I think it is that kind of satirical, like obviously being a homophobe and like being that toxic masculinity is stupid. So that's what the song is pointing out.
And they demonstrate it by making him mow astroturf, which is just like the perfect like way to make fun of a 50s style house dad. It's just like, this is why choreography is important, people. This like little scenes like this just like put the whole thing together. And I don't listen to this song a lot, but because it's like, if you're not watching it with the video, you'll like get a completely different thing. Like if you typed out the lyrics from this, it wouldn't be out of place on like a dumb angry uncle Facebook message post. So we get a nice little scene. It's a brilliant scene, but it's just not something that like you definitely skip over in the soundtrack when you're listening to it.
Okay, I'm curious, Kyle. Yep. How many times have you listened to the soundtrack?
I don't listen. I maybe like I don't listen to the whole thing when I do it. I just listen to like the songs I like usually. I might flip through Denton USA and then this and then Bitchin' in the Kitchen and Dual Duet and occasionally a Little Black Dress.
Okay, because this was like this was my first time watching Shock Treatment. I've seen Rocky Horror, loads of times, but like I haven't ever watched Shock Treatment. So like how many times have you seen this movie and when did you fall in love with the soundtrack?
I was introduced to it via like a Cinema Snob episode, which is where I first heard about it, and then I ordered it on DVD because I wanted to watch it, and then I watched it, and I've watched it like 3 times counting this, and I just kind of like liked it from the initial watch of it. I didn't realize how much I would like it until I see it, but I just saw that Cinema Snob review and was like motivated to go watch it because I liked it quite a bit.
Okay, so that brings me to a funny story that I need to tell, because I I sat down to watch this last night, and yeah, because that's how prepared I am, is that I left it right to the last minute, you know, my style. So I sat down to watch this, and I had found a movie called Shock Treatment online, and so I start it, and it starts with like this driving scene and like some people sitting in the back of a truck, and then the music starts. I'm like, oh, here we go, opening song, we're gonna get into Shock Treatment. Whoopee, I love musicals. And it was in
Oh,
French, and it was the wrong movie. So I had I I almost reviewed Shock Treatment 1973 or 78. I don't know. It was a French movie from the
yours not
70s,
too far off though.
and then I realized my mistake and I went and found the right one. No,
Yeah, this is
I was
yeah.
very confused. So,
Yeah, it's
um
81, so that's you're kind of like in the right time frame.
yeah, which is why it was so weird, because I was like, "Oh yeah, like it, like aesthetically it looked fine in the first few frames, and like the title was exactly the same." Um and so yeah, I almost got into a totally different movie, which I think I said the last time I was on the podcast that I was going to start watching alternate movies and then see if you could tell that I hadn't done my homework. So I almost did it, Kyle. I
Yeah.
almost did it.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a yeah, that's my story about how I picked up on it, and I've just enjoyed it quite a bit when I watched it. So I've been eventually driven me to watch Rocky Horror for the podcast, and yeah. So yeah, I like it quite a bit.
So you watched Shock Treatment first and then
Yep.
you watched Rocky Horror?
Yeah, no, Rocky. This was the first Rocky. When I watched it
Oh,
2 weeks ago for the podcast, that was the first time I watched Rocky Horror.
okay, we'll talk more about that at the end of the podcast, because I think that's kind of interesting, if that's all right with
Yeah,
you,
sure, we can
because I
do
think
that.
we
Yep.
still have to get through the plot.
Yeah, that'll be a fun little end conversation. Yeah. Um. So yeah, there we get that scene
Mhm.
portraying Janet's parents' bigotry. We get a conversation between Snitz and the McKinleys about where it's mentioned that the boss Farley Flavors is pushing the admittance of Brad and Janet. Obviously, this is like a bit of a metaphor for him wanting to get financial gain, which isn't better. It's one of those things where, like, yeah, it's a metaphor. It's not exactly what happens in real life, but if he was just doing this for fun and profit, would that be better? Let's be honest, he'd still be evil. Um, yeah, the real. It's like when Joker, where it's like, oh yeah, that's a movie portraying the evils of like not properly dealing with mental health. And yeah, most mental health people don't end up killing 3 people, but like the other end of that movie where it's more realistic, where like an untreated mental health patient ends up committing suicide, isn't a better thing, and it doesn't dissuade the message of the movie. So it's one of the occasions where the metaphor works all right. Janet has like a scene where she sings her gripes about Brad and her problems she's having with him, which is interesting. And it's yeah, it's she gets actually a fair number of songs. I think 2 of them are fully hers, and like a third two more are at least partially hers. So she's a major part of the movie here, and we communicate her mental process as we go through.
The reason the actress, who I can't remember her name off the top of my head, Kyle, shock trivia.
Jessica Harper.
Thank you. Thank you. The reason that she gets so many songs is because she's a fucking amazing singer. Her voice is amazing. Like, I love her
Yeah.
songs. She's just so fantastic. And the quality of her voice, like, she's lower, she's kind of like smoky, like, oh man, that it did it for me. I was like so in love.
Yeah, she pulls this off, and like you don't get like it's. I don't feel like I'm missing Tim Curry when I watch this. Like everyone in this show pulls their weight, which is just like you don't have those big name actors, but everyone's pulling their weight by a wide margin, I think.
Well, okay, I wouldn't go as far as saying that I don't miss Tim Curry, but Jessica Harper does an excellent job carrying her role in this, definitely, and I love her musical numbers.
So yeah, apparently the plan is it's revealed that the plan is to play up Janet so that she can be in a spin-off show with Farley, presumably so that he can steal Janet away from Brad. Which why is Farley stealing Brad's wife? We'll find out. So there's conspiracy going on. Dr. Cosmo McKinley does show some apprehension toward this, but ultimately goes along with it. So I don't know what the point of that was. So they do a bunch of practice placement. Oh yeah, by the way, a little side note about all these shows is that they all have like it's basically all advertisements. There's a lot of product placement. I think in the scene we get with Janet's parents, they basically, as they're doing the thing, they insert commercials while they're going to do an action. Like Janet's dad goes to get a beer and they start advertising a beer. They advertise the toaster as they're getting something from the toaster. They advertise the lawnmower as they're doing that. And it's just inserted into the show, not even like having the decency to be outside of the commercials. And this is why television died. Thank God, because you don't think they'd be doing this. I'm surprised it's not just this. Frankly, I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, they're putting commercials into $70 video games now.
Really?
Yeah, no, the most recent UFC and NBA 2K games have unskippable commercials in them.
Really?
For like Amazon's The Boys or like $70 video games, probably with microtransactions, having commercials in them. That's a thing they're doing right now.
Wow, that's wild, man.
The AAA game industry is dead. Yeah, the AAA game industry is dead.
Hey, watch your mouth, because it's November 7th, and so it's N7 Day, and they just announced a Mass Effect remaster for all 3 games. And so I am going to be pouring all of my money into that in the spring, so you be careful insulting.
Well, they need to make up for that money they lost making Anthem somehow.
This is true. They also, my sister, who is also a huge BioWare fan, she had told me that they are redoing Anthem so that it's a first-person story-based game instead of whatever they tried to pull off. So I definitely I get it.
Why?
Because, Kyle, that's what I want.
No one cares about Anthem. Just move on. Make another Dragon Age.
Well, that is what I want more.
Or Mass Effect. Yeah. Either way.
Okay, sorry. This is
or Star Wars of the old Knights of the Old Republic. Do that.
You can get that on your iPhone.
I have it on my computer. I just yeah. But no, I want a new one.
Yeah, fair. But we get very distracted, and that's mostly my fault. I apologize.
I mean, it's a podcast. If you want concise information, you got to go to like, I don't know. Where do you get concise information?
I would,
I honestly don't
yeah,
know. This is an open question.
that is nowhere. Like the library, maybe.
So Betty gets news that she's been canceled. They continuing to play up Janet. They've replaced Betty with this blonde woman who cheated with on her husband Ralph with him. So just to make her enormously angry, I imagine. Like that's a special kind of getting pissed off, is like your husband cheating on you and then you literally getting replaced in your job and not only your home. So that's a she raises a few middle fingers to the remainder of this movie.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't really care about her.
Janet's staying at the yeah. Janet's staying in the studio tonight. So they do that. We get a scene of uh, the nurse making out with the intern, and also the McKinnons making out. So yeah, they're not siblings. We talked about this, but this is a weird addition to the script. I don't know what the point of this is, to be perfectly honest. Maybe just to see uh, Patricia Quinn in her underwear, which fair, I guess.
What does fair, I guess, mean?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so everyone's staying. So Janet's staying in the studio tonight, symbolizing her getting stuck in the system. I think that's how I'm going with this. That's the narrative I'm playing with. So, audience also sleeps in the studio, so the audience is also trapped in this nonsense. Which, why are you staying here? Go home. This is literally the death of capitalism, is when they get to make you choose where you get to sleep.
It's because it's meant to be meta, right? Like the whole thing is set up to be like a movie, a show within a show within a movie, right? So it's like it is funny. I didn't realize that everyone was sleeping until they panned up and did like an overhead shot, and there's all these people like just in their chairs, and I was like, what is going on? And a lot of that strangeness, I think, is chalked up to the fact that they're trying to break like the fourth wall and be funny and be very very meta with it, right? So that was one of the notes I had down, was meta AF.
Yeah, this is a symbol of them being trapped within the system, I think. Yeah.
Well, and just that the one of my notes for this part was that it's supposed to be meta, right? Like it's supposed to be very very meta, and so that's what I had written down, was meta
Yeah.
AF.
Yeah. They're really trapped in this. I kind of want to chat about this. This is kind of like, this is where we get really into like the theme of them being people being trapped into the system and that they can't leave and whatnot. And I think you could say that's a symbolism for capitalism and how we're trapped into it, and we literally can't imagine getting out of it unless we'd sooner imagine destroying the world. But yeah, we're moving on from that. There's also like like a instance of like false inclusivity with it. Like a lot of I think there is like a clear racial subtext to this. Like all the hosts of all the shows are white. There's one black dancer who tries to advance, and like if you talk to a lot of black content creators, they'll talk about how like, oh, they're kept around for diversity, but they aren't allowed to advance, which is very interesting. And you definitely see that with her. And there's a line at the very beginning of the movie where they open up the overture, where the one singer's just like, um, tolerance for the ethnic races, which is put in there. And you're just like, what the fuck? Why do you need to say that? And it's like clearly just a false thing, because like they shove the African American actress to the side so that in aids for the in to the benefit of the white leads, which is just another crack that they've thrown on this on like the establishment. Um, and I think toward the end we do get to a point where it's just like, oh yeah, we're just condemning the fact that business people would get to control all our lives, which is a very pertinent thing in a movie which came out like a year after Reagan was
Mhm.
elected.
Yeah, no, you're everything you said, I think is so spot on. I made a note of the like the tolerance for ethnic races comment, and then like it's like 2 bars of music. Like it's a whole nother like 10 seconds, 15 seconds before you see the first like person of color in the entire movie. And I think yeah, you're right. Like I think that was intentional because again, this movie is pointing out a lot of like kind of satirical commentary on these injustices, right? And um which is why I'm fond of it.
Yeah. Also, on to my point that this movie is also like partially British. So, in 1979, Margaret Thatcher would also have been elected during the time this was made. So there's also that. Um, but yeah, this is. I think that's a valuable thing. There, there's like, okay, we're talking about something else right now, but this is definitely a thing, and we're gonna put it in so that everyone knows. Yeah, but like this kind of like puts this is kind of like this movie kind of like puts out a response to the idea that movies with all white characters are apolitical, because for a lot of people when you talk to them and they're like, oh, I'm sick of forced diversity, they're really just saying this because black people are in the movie or gay people are in the movie or trans people are in the movie. It's just a bunch of nonsense because like if a movie's full of all white people, that's also a statement you can make. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, but you got to be noticed that like if you have like an all white cast, that's a statement you're making. And yeah, sometimes the statement is like, okay, we're portraying like 15 real people who were all white, but most of the time that's not the case.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said that it is a like everything is political. It is a statement. And I'm sorry, but like the idea that diverse people just somehow started living in like, 2004 when we started talking about representation in the media like is so ridiculous because, you know, like, that's how fucking power works. That when you are the top dog, the stories are all going to be about you and all reflect you and your reality. And so, like, the idea that where this issue comes out really pronounced, I think, is with like like uh LGBTQ communities, queer communities, and pride, like that lots of straight people will be like, "Oh, there's a sexual like thing going on where we're just oversexing people and blah 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 blah, like all this junk." I'm like, "No, the like people who are queer have been alive for our entire
Yeah.
history." But they were not the people in power recording history. And so, of course, we get this false sense of identity as, like, I think humans, and especially here in the like in the Western world in North America, where it's like, no, somehow being queer is deviant, but when really it's because like straight people have been in power and are making it so. And so, like, yeah, that it really bothers me because we're finally starting to like represent the diversity of human experience, which has always been complicated and diverse and beautiful. And we're finally getting to a place where we're actually reflecting that. And then, people who are bigoted are coming down and saying, this isn't accurate, this is blowing it out of proportion, not as many people like this exist in the world. And it's like, yeah, they do. They just have always been silenced because of your, mono story. And it really bugs me. That's my rant.
Yeah, and like I've like there's a really helpful quote that I don't know who originally said it, but someone once like someone had said there are two races and two genders, white and political and male and political. And that's kind of how like a lot of this anti-diversity talk comes off. It's just like, oh, there's a woman in this, it's a political statement, and like white man being a star of something is never seen as a political statement, which is, look, sometimes people aren't trying to make political statements, but yeah, sometimes you make them inadvertently, and you got to be aware of that. You're not excused to not consider things like that.
Well, and that's where I think like cancel culture, we've kind of briefly talked about this because it plays in a part of this movie. Like where we're seeing people get canceled while being held accountable for, not acknowledging that there is more than one story, right? And so like I think it's really empowering actually that we're arriving at a place where people who have been disempowered and marginalized and oppressed have the opportunity um to like to take up space in our culture when we haven't given them that space before, um
Yeah.
and it's like how ridiculous that we just, even to validate someone's personal experience is like big and scary for some people, right? Like
Yeah.
that just, I'm like, how? When you could literally walk into any action movie any year from like the time movies started to now and see a movie with a completely white cast and a bunch of men, right? Like it's still disproportionate in the favor of men and white men particularly. Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. No. At the risk of going too long with this, I mean, there's no such thing as too long with this. I think people have and will talk about this for 4 hours at a time. But I'll also say like cancel culture is not something you can like. Cancel culture and internet harassment are separate problems, and attaching like internet harassment to cancel culture as if they're the same thing isn't a smart idea, because internet harassment is something that happens for a variety of very stupid reasons. So to like
Mhm.
attach it to like call it cancel culture is like a misnomer. And besides, like the people, like a lot of people they claim are like victims of cancel culture aren't canceled by any means. I think like Louis C.K. took like a year off, maybe, when he got canceled. Um, and like fucking Bill Cosby was booking shows up until he went to jail. So, I
Mhm.
mean, it doesn't
Well,
mean
or
anything necessarily.
well, or like the person that I think of is like right now J.K. Rowling, right? Um,
Yeah,
who like has said some really horrible and problematic
yeah,
things and hasn't done the work to like humbly apologize or anything. She's doubled down. And so then that's where I think
yeah,
like when I speak about cancel culture, I mean like there are people who have power and a platform and status and money and privilege in our world, and then they double down on really harmful ideology and
yeah,
like just ickiness, and then it's like, well, yeah, you should be held accountable, especially because like the people who have invested in you and your brand and your stories are telling you that what you've said is harmful, right? Like when me
yeah.
as a lover of Harry Potter has said, whoa, like that's really harmful and you're hurting your fan base, like don't you think you should wake up and maybe do some reflection on like what you're saying and how it could be harmful and how it's like appropriate that there are consequences, because like if we're going to participate in a capitalist society where, you know, being a consumer is its own kind of power, well then sorry, I'm going to use that to cancel you then, right? So then,
Yeah.
so that's what I mean. I'm not talking about like internet harassment where like I disagree with what you've said and now I'm going to bully you. Like that's, I don't know, that's a whole other
Yeah.
thing. I think you're right. Like those two things don't get mixed up together, but like cancel culture in terms of holding people who have privilege and power accountable for not doing the deep work of like becoming more educated and to be more like,
Yeah.
or less homophobic or whatever it is that they're being called to do. Like, I'm sorry, you can't hide behind like, well, cancel culture is toxic. I'm like, no, being a homophobe is toxic. So anyway, I'm sorry. I know that you were like,
And
let's not talk
yeah,
about this. And meanwhile, I'm
yeah.
like, no, here's my thesis.
No, yeah. I know saying any word about it is just going to drive us forward. That's a bit of a, there's a word for that. I don't know what it is. But yeah, no, it's, yeah, we'll skip it. I'll just, fuck, if I say anything else, we're just going to keep going. I should just keep going. If I, as much as I'd like to keep going on this, we just got to get rid of, keep going.
We have to
Sorry, we
finish
gotta
our review of Shock
forgo.
Treatment.
Yeah, we got to. Sorry, guys. It's, we came here with a purpose. So yeah, Janet isn't being allowed to see Brad. They keep trying to distract her and saying that the best way to help him is to become a big starlet, which I guess she's not an expert in psychology, so I guess that there's a reason for her not to understand that totally. Um, so yeah, she goes along with it. She gets I think this is where we get the Little Black Dress song. Farley compliments her over a television a little bit because he is in a television. Um, the parents are a little skeptical of what's happening to Brad. They go to visit him in the little cage where they're keeping him all drugged up. And literally just like a circular cage where he's kept in a wheelchair with a gag in his mouth and getting continually drugs. And to prove that the parents aren't the Jan's parents aren't entirely innocent in this, they shove a bit of more pills down his mouth, which is a bit of the one thing in this movie that kind of like gives me pause, because there's obviously like a harmful subtext that can exist for anti antidepressant culture, because sometimes they're helpful for some people, but I don't think that's the main focus of the movie, but it's just something to keep in track that like I think this is maybe just like infusing drugs into the system in order to keep people docile, and really, I don't know. Yeah, it's the one little note of the film where I'm just like, oh, I don't know about this. This is a bad choice, maybe. But they're very much weaponizing drugs in a way to keep people docile instead of using them to help people. I don't really know how psychiatric drugs are used, so there's only so much I can say on that.
I think like I can speak to it just a little bit, but not like obviously I am not an authority on this, but just I from a storytelling perspective, it seems to me to kind of harken back to some of the tropes we see with like mental institution like horror genre, right? Because this is still marketed as like a dark comedy, horror comedy sort of idea. It's a little bit, I think, brighter or something than Rocky Horror is, but it still has like you see a lot of like mental institution horror out there, and so I do wonder if some of the reason for like drugging Brad is like to play on some of those tropes, and maybe like it is likely that what you're saying is also true, and there are like that it's maybe not a great choice, because you're right that psychiatric drugs do help people, and we know that things like anxiety and depression have chemical components to them, right? But that conversation is still so divided that I feel like back in 1981, um, maybe this was more about, like, I don't know, more about the horror tropes that they were pulling on, and like that mental hospital, lunatic asylum kind of flavor that is definitely happening in Denton TV, or
Yeah,
Dentondale,
and
I guess.
this is the '80s, so it's a lot. It's not nearly as removed from like the really harsh, like One Over the Cuckoo's Net style bad psychiatry that was going around at the time. Like, there are people like probably alive at that time that had been lobotomized as like a psychiatric treatment. A lot of like really barbaric things were happening not all that long before this movie was produced in like so-called psychiatric hospitals. And some people do weaponize psychiatric hospitals, and it was really bad back in the day. um, I know it, and it's still weaponized today. We don't really talk about it, but like, I think in Florida, people can be like put into a mental institution without a trial or something. Like, there's still some bad rules around today, and the like we forget how not out of the woods we are with a lot of like pseudoscientific stuff that got popular in the 20th century. Like, it wasn't so long ago. There's lots of people that are like, we're slowly weeding out like eugenicists and whatnot, but they're still around. Like, people were taught eugenics in school, like, until fairly recently. A lot of those doctors are still practicing. And that's something we got to remember when we talk about getting rid of old like problematic institutions that are based in like pseudoscience, is that they don't go away overnight. Like, the newest people might be educated properly in it, but that's all we can hope for. We don't unlicense every physician the second we discover that like something's problematic. And yeah, we
Right.
got to accept that when we're thinking about this.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. Um yeah, no, it's like when people are like saying like, "Oh, well, racism was like racist laws were struck down in the 1970s or in like the 1960s in the States." Um those policies didn't go away. The politicians that were in power still, a lot of them still did believe that was the best way to do things, and and that influences post Jim Crow politics more than people like to admit. Like, they'll do things like to fight to like still adhere to like the spirit of those Jim Crow laws, if not being able to directly do that. And that's honestly very damaging, because a lot of like, it allows for like innocent, like non targeted peoples to get caught in the crossfire too, which isn't good. It's And we got to understand that when we're examining stuff like that. Anyway, um, so yeah, we get our little. Janet gets her little black dress. She's getting ready to do this. She goes to visit. She finally gets to go to visit Brad once she's broken out. Once she's been totally brainwashed to a degree. And she like walks in and she's like, "Hey, Brad, I just want to tell you how fabulous I am." And like, she's really bought into this, and like, and put her in a position where she's really not questioning the position Brad's going to be in, which is really quite horrifying. And then we get the title song, which is really good.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, why we, well, I don't know how to feel about Janet at this point in the movie, because it really doesn't, I don't understand how she, like, kind of the transformative, how she goes from being like, well, he has a little bit of trouble, to like, I'm going to abandon you, sucker. Like, it was just seemed like the motivation was a little bit confusing for me, and so I didn't quite understand her character development. But Shock Treatment, the title song, is so good that it's like, well, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, it's really like building up to this. Like they've just like played this so that she's like exposure to this at the moment where she's most acceptable to like this status quo, that she's willing to accept this. She eventually does get when she starts getting out of control though and starts getting too big for her britches, they end up drugging her and trying to control her too, and that she gets drugged, and they have her talk to some fans, and she has been put into a position where she no longer likes where she is, and uh she's introduced to this band called Oscar and the Bits, who are like admiring her and want to be just like her, and she's just like, nah, you don't want to be like me, which is an interesting little like arc, I think, where like she's being brought up as this role model to people, and then the people that she's role modeling are going to learn from her mistakes. This is something that happens in real life. I know a lot of things that happen in like 90s comic books are in response to stuff that happened to the greats of the 60s and 70s. The guys who broke off into Image Comics were doing so to fight against the bad things that was happening to the artists of the 1960s. So this is an entirely unrealistic scenario. And toward the end of the movie, Oscar and the Bits will go away with Janet Janet and Brad as they break away from this fame and fortune and lifestyle. So they send in the Bits to play while Janet recovers from her drug-induced state, which is something that has been put on her by management, which I imagine something can be put in here about rock stars and drugs to make them more amenable to corporate meddling, perhaps. Perhaps taking a few more tour dates than they probably should, and more than is healthy. Certainly nothing that is at all applicable to stuff that happens in real life. Certainly nothing involving the WWE. Certainly nothing involving that.
But Kyle, Fight Island. Did you see that last week tonight with John Oliver's episode? We talks about the WWE and like COVID.
I recall them like getting like a bunch of people getting COVID and then going specifically to Florida to film their show because those were the few idiots that would have let them do what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Anyway, we can keep going.
That's what I remember about the WWE.
You see things in movies that are quite impressive, because I don't think I would have like drawn that like rock and roll and corporate management kind of correlation, but there's definitely something there. Yeah, it's this whole like kind of Janet's evolution and story arc. It becomes more interesting, like you said, when she's kind of compared to the younger generation and like seen as a role model and stuff like that. But like the build up to it, I kind of didn't get the motivation for. So like the payoff was interesting, but maybe for me the build up didn't make sense. So I don't know.
It's a bit quick, yeah. Yeah, I don't know that they spent enough time on it quite to get it to work. But I don't know. I think it turns out okay. I get the gist of it. Anyway, but yeah, I know it can be perceived as a weaker part of the movie. So meanwhile, in Judge Wright and Becky's cancellation, they have been sneaking around. They sneak into the back so that they can expose some stuff. and they sneak into like a computer file and find out some very interesting things. They find out that the McKinnons are not actually the McKinnons, and that they're character actors and not really doctors, which is yeah, that's surprising. I had never imagined that a TV doctor wouldn't be a doctor. That's totally unheard of in the real life. Um, and also that Farley Flavors is also adopted, like Brad, his brother, because there was a car accident when those two were kids, and these twin brothers were adopted into separate households. So that's their relations. And I guess Farley has broken down and is using his money and power, which he has inherited from his rich family, in order to steal things that aren't his, like a capitalist.
Like a capitalist. Sorry, that was good. Good job, Kyle.
Yeah. So they do that. Janet has been being played up as like she's going to be the star of this new show called Sanity for Today, and she is going to be Miss Mental Health alongside Farley in order to pretend to be this wholesome American couple, despite being like this incredibly borderline immoral situation where she left her husband to be with Farley in Farley's hypothetical scenario, which I don't know. When have establishment politicians ever not been the wholesome people they claim to be?
We're so
Donald.
subtle here at Kyle and Victoria's Cult Cinema Cast. Just
Anyway.
super subtle.
Yep. Yeah, so they do that. Well, and this has happened, and while she is finally going to meet Farley in person, Becky and Judge Wright go to break Brad out of prison using hairpins as lockpicks and whatnot. Janet meets Farley face to face, and in her like kind of like depressed state, she's just like, Brad? And like notices that hey, this Farley guy looks a lot like her husband.
But
if he would clean up
I
once
like
in a while.
dorky Brad and his stupid glasses. Stupid Farley looks creepy and plastic.
I admit, I'm fair enough. I'm just making a joke about husbands being slobs. I don't know.
Sorry, Kyle, you were making a joke about husbands being slobs with all your husband experience?
Oh yeah, no, we're terrible. Anyway, so yeah, she's kind of like out of it for the rest for a significant part of the climax. They roll her out on stage, and she's kind of just like staring in like a drug-addled state at the camera. They bring a convertible onto the stage, what they're supposedly going to give to her, but Cosmo sneaks them away from the guy giving her the keys. So they're setting up this thing, and at the last moment, Brad breaks through the set in order to have a confrontation with Farley on the Mindscape. They don't really fight or anything. He's just like, "Who are you, sir? I am your twin brother and your accuser." And then they do like an epic little duel thing. Farley and Brad Majors are played by the same actor, just so you know. Farley is just Cliff DeYoung in like his slicked back hair, and you don't really notice unless you know beforehand, because it's they look fairly different. Like Farley doesn't wear glasses at all, Brad, and has like smooth straight hair, whereas Farley yeah, no, I had that right. I got that confused. But yeah, so yeah, I know when I watched this with my sister, she didn't really notice that they were the same person. Did you notice, Victoria?
Well, I knew ahead of time, so I cheated. But I agree, like the Clark Kent effect is strong in Brad and his brother Farley, because Yeah, like Farley doesn't look like Brad at all. And so you have to kind of pay really close attention to like their jawline. But if you weren't looking for it, yeah, I don't think you would put those two together. No.
Yeah. It's more of a Sosuke Aizen effect, honestly, more than a Clark Kent effect.
Sorry, fucking just hold the phone.
That's a
Hold the phone.
anime
No,
reference.
just shh. Did you just correct me? like you just out nerded and corrected me because I didn't use the proper allusion? The fuck, Kyle? Like my Clark Kent reference wasn't good enough for you?
Actually, like, to be fair, the reason I did it is because I wanted to make a Bleach reference.
But okay.
I never get to reference Bleach on this show. I needed an opportunity.
You're welcome for setting you up for that.
Thank you.
Moving on.
Yeah, so they have a very this dual. It's called Dual Duet on the soundtrack. It's very good. They do not mince words with each other. They are brutal to each other. Like Brad makes one line towards like convincing Farley to back down, and he's just like, we lost our mom, we lost our dad, or no, we lost our home, our family, and now you've lost compassion. Now you're losing me, and that's really the only hand he reaches out for him. This very much ends with like them both saying like the best thing you could ever do was die. So they are not friends like after this, and it leads to a far more emotional song, I think, where they're just like really angry at each other for a lot of it. Um, uh, Brad says to Farley that he has a kisser like an alligator mister, which is the harshest of insults, really.
Brad says to Farley. I think this song is maybe the best song in the entire movie. I'm like it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I think lots of just like really tough, sharp lines of just like Farley will be just like, you're a loser, an abomination in the eyes of any sensitive man. Just like really harsh musical language. Yeah, so that ends with them just having a stare down and Farley denying the whole thing, and he's just saying, you force me to refuse her. So he has to like just pretend to make out with the blonde who cheated on Ralph with Becky, or on the one that Becky's always mad at for cheating on her husband. So they get that thing, and they kind of just get left behind as like Farley lures the entire crown into Denton Vale so they can be wrapped up in straitjackets and then like pretend they're happy while really being in cages. The end goal of the Republican capitalist agenda. Beware its power. Beware, beware. So yeah, they some police actually shove them aside, which the police working for a private entity in order to like preserve private interests, that's not something they ever do. So yeah, they get shoved into a room and eventually they get left behind. And the Oscar and the Bits, Brad, Janet, Judge Wright, and Becky steal the convertible and then drive off, doing the finale song of anyhow, and how they're going to steal this car anyhow, they're going to do it anyhow. So yeah, they steal the convertible and drive off, and that's the end of the movie. It's really good. I like the song anyhow. It's kind of nice. Lots of jokes.
It is definitely steeped in sexual innuendo, which is fantastic. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
No, like the movie overall is really entertaining, even if it is confusing to follow at times. Like, I definitely had a hard time, like, hearing and understanding what people were saying, and so I feel like I missed out on a lot of jokes, but, like, overall, it was entertaining, and I love musicals, and so the songs were fun. I'm really curious, Kyle, like, about how you watched this before watching Rocky Horror and comparing the two. Like, is this your favorite, or how do you feel about Rocky Horror?
I think they're really close in quality, personally. Um, like I think like perhaps Rocky Horror has like a more important message, but I think these are really close in quality. Like I think I'm giving both of these movies an 8 because I think they're really close in quality, and I think like this is more like less known because it didn't get a proper release more than anything, and I think that comparing the two, I think they're really close in quality, and I don't think that people who like Rocky Horror are going to be disappointed with this follow up. They maybe won't like it as much, but I don't think they're going to be
See,
as yeah.
okay, because I watched Rocky Horror, like I had mentioned earlier, I watched Rocky Horror many times before I watched this. Um, So, like, I'm not as much of a fan of this. I can just tell, like, it doesn't have the same nostalgia that Rocky Horror would have for me. I understand, like, that it's entertaining and that some people would enjoy this on its own, but, like, I disagree. I think I don't see the, fans of Rocky Horror falling in love with this the same way, right? And I guess you said that they maybe won't like it as much, but they're still getting similar content. But I don't know, like, it just didn't have the same, like, I think, nostalgia factor maybe
Oh yeah,
for me. And so, like, Rocky Horror in my mind would be like, I agree, like an 8 or a 9. And then this would probably, I'm pretty firm about a 6, because it was entertaining and I liked it overall. I'd probably watch it again. But in terms of, like, understanding really what was happening and just being confused about some of the pieces, um, yeah, like, Rocky Horror wins and is more entertaining, I think. So yeah, maybe a
yeah.
6.5. I'll give them an extra point for the costume. The little black dress costume is fantastic in this one. Better
Yeah,
than Janet's light pink baby dress.
yeah. The ratings on this are like 5.8 on Robin IMDb, 57 on Rotten Tomatoes, and 36 on Metacritic, which is just criminally low, I think. Like I'm not saying it's like this is better than
Oh
Rocky
yeah.
Horror. I think they're perhaps like similar in quality. Um, like I think maybe Rocky Horror is a bit better, but I like them both pretty on par. I think that maybe you can certainly say that like Rocky Horror has a more important message, but I don't necessarily think that it's a quote unquote better movie. I think it's maybe more important, but I think it is in for like pure enjoyment factor. I think they're about fairly similar, and I think it gives it. I think it has like its nice little uh, underhanded like indirect commentary on like Nixon era politics. So
Okay, well, compared to the last movie you made me watch for the podcast, this is way better. So I do appreciate
half
that.
as long too.
Um,
So
this was way more entertaining
yeah,
and half as long. Oh my goodness, Kyle, I
yeah.
can't believe you made me watch a 3-hour movie. Ugh.
I mean, I now just got to get Cody Curtis to watch one because Cody's watched a 3 hour movie with me. So I don't know. I don't know if I have any 3 hour movies left on my
Like,
docket.
do you enjoy torturing your friends, you little sadist? Like, like, were you popular at school? Because usually you don't enjoy making your friends sit through 3 hours of Phileas Fogg.
I don't know. I like my three. I like my long movies sometimes, but yeah, no, not obviously around the world in these days. Not anything Michael Bay makes. So because he's got in his head that he needs 3-hour movies. So yeah.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, it was good.
Yeah.
This was a good one, and I'm thankful that you made me watch
Yeah.
it. So
So yeah, you'll be back in Christmas to do a Christmas movie with me of some sort. And then next week I got Cody back for I think 2 weeks. Yeah, I got Cody back for 2 weeks here. And we're going to do the next section of the podcast sub theme of the worst movies to win best picture at the Oscars with a Morgan Freeman picture, Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh.
So Cody's watching that with me next. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then after that, it's the 10th episode poll, which I'm going to put up sometime tomorrow morning. So that'll be up Sunday morning, and you can vote on that until, let's say, the 9th episode goes up, or until like say we'll vote on that until Monday before the Monday before the episode goes, the Driving Miss Daisy goes up. That'll be the 10th episode, and then Curtis will be on after that. So yeah, Victoria, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. So yeah, my name, Victoria Koops. You can find me online on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Victoria Koops Writes. And you can find me at my website at www.victoriakoops.com. Right now, I am currently working on a National Novel Writing Month project. So I'm starting my second manuscript, which is a story, a young adult novel about cosplay and racial ambiguity. So really excited about that, but like that's in its first draft stages. So if you want to learn more about my writing in general and kind of follow how the agent process is going, and watching for hopefully a book deal coming out at some point. I have no news on that yet, but I'm hoping that eventually this year I will be able to tell your listeners that I have a book deal. That's following me on social media is the best way to do that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing, what I'm about right now. And again, at Victoria Koops Writes.
Good. Yeah, and you can find the podcast at Kyle and Cody's called CinemaCast on Facebook and YouTube. You can find it on Twitter at KCCCCC. You can find me at on Twitter at Lord Brokenshire, where you can find my different hot takes about movies. I did a thing about Frankenstein last week because I watched that for Halloween. Or I watched 3 Frankenstein movies for Halloween. And then you can also, just keep your eye out. We got projects on the way, and we're going to have the 10th episode poll out on the Facebook. So keep your eye out for that. And yeah, see you guys next week. Goodbye.